Global biodiversity has dropped by 73% since 1970. The last 17 months were the hottest 17 months in 100,000 years. We are rapidly approaching or have already crossed many ecological tipping points, after which the Earth system dramatically changes. For example, the Amazon rainforest may cross a tipping point in the near future where it cannot sustain tropical forests, which would tank biodiversity, upheave regional and global weather patterns, destroy the global food system, and release up to 75 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere. Changes like these are also called ecological collapse, which essentially means our living planet will die. But we're not there yet. We're very, very, very close, but not there yet. So how do we stop it? To answer this, we need to know what's causing it and then do something about that. You've probably heard that humans caused climate change, or the Industrial Revolution caused climate change. This makes sense at first glance. The human population started to increase, the Industrial Revolution started not long after, and then climate change began. So, if overpopulation and industry are the causes, should we depopulate the world and get rid of industry? Should we go back to living like hunter-gatherers with no modern technology? Probably not. Depopulating the world, at least all at once, would almost certainly mean genocide. That seems like a bad idea. So, what do we do instead? Let's think about this deeper. These graphs only show three things: population levels, carbon dioxide levels, and time. There's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, and climate change isn't just about carbon dioxide levels. We might be tempted to say something like more people caused the Industrial Revolution. More people means we need more resources and food to support them, which means we need more production to create those things, right? So we can't separate the two. More people necessarily means more production. And we just established that we shouldn't get rid of the people, so we need all this production and we just need to make it greener or something. Except, that's only true to a point. We are currently producing much, much, much more than it would take to be able to secure decent living standards for everyone alive on Earth, and still, almost nobody has decent living standards. According to a study published in September this year, at least 6.8 billion people are currently living without decent living standards, which they define by having things like nutritious food, modern housing, healthcare, education, electricity, clean cooking stoves, clothing, washing machines, sanitation systems, refrigeration, heating and cooling, computers, mobile phones, internet, transit, etc. But if you live in the United States, chances are that you work more than 40 hours a week and you're still having trouble just meeting the first 4 basic needs on this list. And that study didn't even look at wealthy countries like the US, so the actual number of people without decent living standards is probably almost everyone in the entire world. But that study also said that if we shifted our production to focus on meeting these standards, rather than making as much money as we possibly can, we would only need to do about 30% of what we're currently doing, and everyone could have decent living standards. Imagine if you could work less to have more. Imagine if everyone had all their needs met and only worked like 12 hours a week and used way fewer resources. Sounds pretty good, right? And we get to save the climate while doing it. So how do we make this change? How do we convince the people in charge of producing things that their priorities are all wrong? How do we change the system that cares more about profit than quality of human life or the future of life on Earth? Unfortunately, there is no guarantee that changing a system that exists to maximize profit, which is what the United States has, will do anything but maximize profit. We cannot trust that this system will solve the climate crisis, especially as we're seeing things like Google and Microsoft violating their carbon neutrality so they can use obscene amounts of energy and water to show you a non-consensual AI summary on every search. There's absolutely no guarantee that things like carbon taxes or incentives for electric cars will actually save the planet, because that's not really the goal of these changes. Those changes are meant to protect the system from the criticism that it deserves that it's not doing enough to combat climate change. The system will continue to maximize profit because that's what it does. That's what it was built to do. So, if we are more concerned with human well-being and the survival of living things on Earth than profit, we need to build something else that's better at producing these things. You and I probably have no idea how to go about this, so we might feel a little lost. The good news is that some other folks have already figured out systems that do this quite well. And if we want a better world for ourselves and all of life, we need to adopt these systems. They are not hard to implement and would almost immediately improve everyone's life, and they are a commitment that we must now make. I'm talking about Indigenous people. I'm talking about Landback. Western science is finally in agreement with things that Indigenous people have known for millennia. Things like all living things are connected and humans depend on the rest of life for survival. This is because when someone lives somewhere for a while, they figure out how these lands and ecosystems work. That's why the more involvement that Indigenous people have in conservation efforts, the better the social and ecological outcomes. So Western science cannot be the only tool we use to figure out how to dig us out of this mess. It would take decades to use the scientific method to figure out the right way to manage all the different types of lands and ecosystems we have, and we don't have decades. We have months. So our best and frankly only hope is to use the knowledge already collected by Indigenous peoples. But if we're going to acknowledge the legitimacy of traditional ecological knowledge, and I'm saying that we need to now more than ever before, and that if we do not do it right now, it will be too late, we have to acknowledge the violence and oppression that Indigenous people have faced under colonialism. There cannot be effective climate action without climate justice. A climate justice framework does not reduce the climate crisis to a puzzle simply focused on counting carbon. Climate justice centers the place-based leadership of peoples with the longest living knowledge of Earth's natural ecological systems, understanding that such Indigenous traditional knowledge and local ecological knowledge are core to envisioning a long-term strategy for engaging future shocks, slides, pandemics, and upheavals headed our way. So, what is Landback? Does it mean non-Indigenous people have to get off Indigenous land? Not really. Quick history lesson. There were people in the Americas for thousands upon thousands of years, and during this time they were taking very good care of the land and in fact improving ecological diversity. Then colonizers came and incorrectly assumed they were looking at untamed wilderness. They also thought they could profit off the land, so they said, "I want this." And Indigenous people said, "Oh, you guys need help? Sure, we'll give you what we can." And then colonizers said, "No, I want all of it," and did some truly heinous things to get it. This included stuff like attacking unarmed women and children and the elderly, offering bounties for the scalps of Indigenous people, destroying vital food sources, making treaties and then immediately breaking them, intentionally spreading smallpox, slavery, and like a billion other things that would make this video way too long. I would argue that land gotten this way was stolen. So at the end of the day, Landback means this: if you stole it, you should return it. We need to give Indigenous people the rights to their land back and the decision-making power about what happens to their land. But the United States actually stole a lot of stuff beyond just land, like food sovereignty and water rights, so we need to figure out how to give that back too. This will be different everywhere because the nature of the theft was different everywhere, so we will have to listen to Indigenous people tell us what they need. So, if you live in the United States or Canada, your first step should be to find out whose land you're living on. Educate yourself about them and what happened to them under colonialism. Then you can look to see what kinds of resources those people need right now. Lots of them have a tribal website or Instagram page where they tell you exactly that. Some of them need money, some need political support, etc. If you're in a position to contribute these resources, do that now. There is nothing better you can do with your time and money to combat ecological collapse than support the struggle for land back. That's exactly why I made this video, even though it took me weeks of unpaid labor. In that same vein, please tell the people around you that the best thing they can do for climate change is to join the struggle for land back. Encourage them to do all the things I just mentioned. Expose yourself and those around you to decolonial worldviews so we can all see the vision Indigenous people have for the world that we can and must create together. As we start shifting towards the acknowledgement and empowerment of Indigenous people, we should start thinking about shifting away from the systems and ideologies the United States uses. We're seeing increasingly that the United States government is completely unequipped to do anything to mitigate climate change. If you don't believe me, consider that we've known about climate change since the 1970s and it's currently 2024, and we've done functionally nothing. This is because our government, which is part of a system that maximizes profit, is very susceptible to things like fossil fuel corporations sliding them a little cash so they can keep doing what they're doing. This is called lobbying, and it also lets them block climate action, give themselves $750 billion of taxpayer money a year, and build pipelines through native lands, which would break the treaties that the United States signed. The United States is continuing its colonial legacy because, at its core, it's a colonial country. But colonialism kills people and the planet, and we cannot do it anymore. If the argument that human beings are human beings and should not be colonized was not enough, and it really should have been, but whatever, then at the very least, the argument that if we do not decolonize, the natural world will completely collapse should be. Land back now. Indigenous sovereignty now. Save the planet.